I just finished reading the latest chapter today, the day of this recording anyway. It's night outside, so that should explain the artificial lighting over here, and it's not the best lighting, but I really wanted to get this out of the system as soon as possible. Now, this chapter, let's not dance around it. It's a sad chapter. Peter 2-1 dies. Rampage does the ultimate sacrifice and decides to forsake the peace, the everlasting peace of her own finally achieved death in order to save the last survivors, and basically dooming herself in an eternity inside the void of space when she can die and regenerate constantly, basically her worst nightmare, which was horrible, but also beautiful in a tragic sense. Also, Echo dies too, but nobody cares about that. It's a sad chapter. It will most likely make you cry if you really deeply cared about these characters. If you were indeed still invested in the story at this point, you will feel sad about it. And you should. It is sad. You're not buying this for a second, are you? Yes, you guessed it. I have reservations about this chapter. This chapter, in fact, it's quite faulty. Well, let's get things out there as honestly as I could possibly do. This chapter is downright, I won't say bad, even though the first half of it is about as convoluted as it gets, and it's really annoying. But no, it's not really bad. I don't want to say dastardly even, or manipulative. I'll get to that, but there is something wrong with this chapter. Something that, upon thinking about it, upon focusing on that one element, and you bring that one element from the darkness and obscurity, and you put it in the foreground to analyze and pick apart, you realize that this chapter was able to work the way it did because of one single forceful element. And I think you all know of which element I'm talking about. In a word, bastard.
I've been stuck in this hole for way too long. I've got 99 problems that are going on. I woke up a mess of red and black, stiffed my suit and threw it back. The weak pushed over insecurity, so much for camaraderie. This whole damn place is a house of cards, only one nudge from tumbling down. But I gotta be strong, if only for mom. We got 99 things that are going wrong. 99 problems, and the list goes on.
Now, follow me on this journey into insanity, so to speak. A rocket of insanity. Rocket to insanity, if you will. Reference there. Let's talk about this character, Bastard. Who is this character? Why? It's a last-minute introduced character that the writer had the brilliant idea of introducing at the very last minute, to be part of the climax and to be one of the only survivors. And because of that, we know nothing about this character. We only know that he's a mercenary that was working for Cognitum, but he changed his mind when Blackjack told him to. upon gunpoint, and then he's suddenly one of the good guys, and he fights in the final confrontation with Cognitum, and he gets to be one of the only 3 survivors, along with the Blackjack herself, whom, by the way, is now an Alicorn princess. Yes, if you didn't see that coming, you're lying. And Scotch Tape. So the question is, why? Why was this character introduced in such an inappropriate and awkward moment too? And why was he one of the only survivors? Why did he get to leave while characters you actually might care about, like B-21 and Rampage, and possibly even Echo, get to die? Or, well, if not die, at least have a horrible, horrible fate bestowed upon them. I'll tell you why. And again, follow me, because this is as tricky as a writer can get. So picture this scenario. The author wants to kill P-21 and to have Rampage sacrifice herself in that deeply emotionally moving fashion. But he needs to make this scenario, well, not believable, but as powerful and impactful as it needs to be. So, here's how it works. First, he killed off Echo, which was devoured by those Cognitum-possessed... the shadow of my hand is covering my face. This possessed by Cognitum, those blood sprites, mechanical blood sprites possessed by Cognitum, who devoured him in a matter of seconds. And nobody cared about that, by the way. Nobody cared that he died like that. He's just, no, poof, now he's dead. But, bummer. But his death is important. Why? Because he was one of the only 2 ponies in this picture who could actually have the ability, technical know-how, to stall off the ignition of Project Horizons. With him out of the picture, now we have P-21 to do that. So, Echo dies, so that P-21 will be in the perfect position for him to get impaled, and basically slowly dying, but still trying to stall the ignition of Project Horizon for as long as he could, to allow the other characters to escape unarmed. Okay, so Echo died, and P-21 is on his way to die. That's a legitimate... That's why Echo died, for P-21 to be in that position, because the author wants him to die. But that's not the bad part about it. Now, clearly, Scotch Tape doesn't want to leave his daddy because she's tear-stricken, but she needs to be off her way, somehow removed her from the scene, so that Blackjack might have her last final tearful moments with P-21. And it's important that the writer had this final tear-stricken, sad moment in between the 2 of them, because A, they had a relationship, a complicated one that had endured for the majority of the story so far, and because it would make P-21's tearful goodbye all the more powerful. We needed this scene. We needed this emotional denouement between P-21 and Blackjack. Too many P's. P-21 and Blackjack on their own. This moment, this final moment, we needed that. We couldn't have that if Scotch Tape was there to be the 3rd wheel, which is terrible for me to say since she is his daughter, but we needed someone to drag Scotch Tape away from the scene so that Blackjack and P-21 can have their moment. I think I've explained that plenty now. Now, Rampage could have done that. But no. Rampage could not do that because of 2 reasons. 2 plot-related reasons that make way too much sense. She needed to ensure that P-21 wouldn't be crushed by the remaining whatever that were falling, or something like that, so that he could actually stall the ignition of the project, blah blah blah, for as long as he could. And also because Rampage wanted to have her death, her long-awaited death. And the explosion of Tom, the less I say about that, the better, Tom, would have sufficed to destroy her inner talisman and finally die. Which would actually lead her to make the heroic choice of not dying and sacrifice herself to allow the survivors to escape in that broken down tram, and that apparently, per plot-related conveniences, Blackjack could not teleport herself along with the other two survivors, and they could not even open the doors apparently to fly away on the back of the giant Alicorn Princess. They could not do that apparently, so two A names. So Rampage had to push the tram back to the station and then being sucked into the void space that made her sacrifice heroic. Which was terrible, but it was also well written. And more importantly, that's possibly the only logical use the writer could do with Rampage. But that leaves a problem. Now, if you follow all of this reasoning, let me recap. Echo dies so that P21 can be in a position to die. And Rampage has to be there because she's Rampage. It would make sense for her to be there. But with all of these characters otherwise occupied, so to speak, who is left to take Scotch tape and run away so that Blackjack can have her solitary final all-important moment with P21? And it might be at this point that the writer realized, oh no! I need one more character to do this. I have all the characters otherwise occupied in this scenario, but who's going to take Scotch tape and run for it? And the answer is Bastard. No, really, that's the whole point of his existence. I mean, it doesn't really do anything all that important to warrant his, prolonged not dying in this story, which I was expecting any minute now, because let's face it, as a character, it was about as important as that no name, either name, I don't remember it, that infirmary doctor blank flank pony that died in the previous chapter. I don't even remember him anymore. Instead, he's one of the last survivors because he needed to do that one thing that no one else could do at the point, and that is to grab Scotch tape and bring her to the tram so that Blackjack could have her final last tearful moment with P21 and Rampage could do her heroic sacrifice thingy, and thus every little jigsaw piece of jigsaw puzzle could fit in its place, and the writer could have this scenario played out the way he wanted to. And all because he didn't think of bringing another character from Blackjack's large roster of friends and allies to fulfill that role, so he had to introduce a character in the last minute of the climax to do the exact same thing that would allow everything to fall into place. So, if you didn't like this character, this bastard, in more ways than one, really, because he dared to survive, he was virtually a nobody, he dared to survive, while the characters you actually cared about did not, now you have one more reason too, because he exists for the sole purpose of making this scenario possible. P21 dies, and Rampage does her heroic sacrifice because this character exists. This character's very existence made it possible for the writer to kill off P21 in a successful manner, mind you, in an emotionally impactful manner. He would have died anyway, but he wouldn't have the final moment with Blackjack. That was And that was an important moment to have. Trust me, it was not sacrificing that moment would have been a no option. And also for Rampage to do her Rampage thingy, this was all made possible by the existence of a last-minute introduced character made for that specific purpose. The Bastard. Now, Somber might actually come out and say the reason why this character existed was a completely different one. But honestly, I don't want to say I wouldn't buy it, because I do want to give the writer the benefit of the doubt. But that doesn't really matter in the long run, because that's how it feels to me. It feels as the writer introduced a whole new character at the very last minute, right before the climax, in fact, against Cognitum, for the specific purpose of made his long-term thought-out scenario actually possible. Because he didn't think to bring another character from the Earth to travel with them. So he wrote himself into a corner because of that. And thus we have the Bastard. A character that I'm sure everyone is going to love from now on. So, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to be like this, but I'm to be this bitter and all that, especially over a fanfiction. But, let's face it. Nobody likes to feel manipulated. Nobody likes to be manipulated. And when you have a character so blatantly shoehorned for such an obvious purpose, at least it's obvious to me, it feels like it's obvious to me, then that tends to bring you out of the suspension of disbelief, and you see this, you tend to see this otherwise emotional, impactful situation from a distance, and you realize that it doesn't really work because you picked apart all the little things that didn't make it work. Specifically, the introduction of this one character. That didn't have any business existing otherwise. Really? I mean, who does that? Who introduces a character that's supposed to play an important part in a climax of a long-running story right before the climax itself? That's even worse than when the writer introduced those 3 zebra magicians and whatnot 3 chapters ago. I'm sorry, but that's the kind of thing that ruins a chapter, that killed the chapter for me. And when you start to think about it, and you think, if you're like me, you think about it and you think he only exists for do this and this and this to allow this and this and this to die, so that the scenario might work out at the end, then I'm sorry to say this, but you feel manipulated. You feel manipulated, and thus you are not affected by the otherwise very effective tragedy. And I'm sorry to say that, because Rampage's sacrifice was all kinds of beautifully tragic. But I could not enjoy that because I was in the constant presence of the Bastard one, which was there to remind me that all of this was made possible because he was created to make it possible. Also, Tom is a star spirit inside a space rock. That's dumb. Well, I think I'm done here. That was my main complaint with this chapter. Everything else is will be just noise in the background, because it it would just be a reprisal of every other single complaint I've ever had about this story up until this point. So there's no need to go over that again. So that's it. A climax and a tragic moment rendered moot because of one character that didn't have any business being there. That's how my mind works, at least. Sorry if I ruined this chapter for you, if you really enjoyed it. Oh man, I already know nobody's going to love this vlog. Oh, I can already tell that. I can feel the hatred and the flaming activating from a mile ago. Somebody's going to shoot Project Horizons on my face. For daring to say that this chapter isn't very good. But it isn't. Deal with it. Well, this has been Madhog, thy Wastelander, whom is surely is going to die. But telling you this, it was worth it. Getting opinions across in a constructive manner is worth the risk. I am not trolling you.
I woke up a mess of red and black, stiffed my suit and threw it back. The weak pushover insecurity, so much for camaraderie. This whole damn place is a house of cards, only one nudge from tumbling down. But I gotta be strong, if only for mom. We got 99 things that are going wrong. 99 problems, and the list goes on. What's the deal with this breeder buck? And why do I feel like I share his luck? My pip buck sings as the message ticks, as I hear their guns reload and click. Gotta draw them away, P21. The stable won't last if we don't run. I've been wanting to escape here all along. I've had 99 problems, but not for long. I got a 99. 99.